I'm Norman Bay. I'm chair of the RAG for Family Safety, and today I'm talking with Janine Mahoney, a member of the Rotary Club of Melbourne, previously with Canterbury Rotary, and now a management consultant. She's also been a member of our Rotarian Action Group committees from early 2015 and has given us an invaluable practitioner perspective as she was then CEO of Safe Futures, an innovating service provider. Earlier this year, Janine, you were chosen to be the Violence-Free Families Domestic Violence Exchange Ambassador, bit of a mouthful, from District 9800 here in Australia to District 6840 in Louisiana, USA. What did you feel you could gain from going on this exchange, and how did the trip change your thinking?
Well, when I was offered the opportunity, I thought I would gain an enormous amount. I knew that cultural exchanges and learnings from other organisations in overseas settings would give me a much broader understanding, both culturally but also operationally, around how we can do things differently. And I think shared understandings are critical when it comes to looking at enormous challenges such as family violence, which is now a global epidemic. I think that the way that the work is done in the United States, and particularly in New Orleans, is quite inspirational, and it is something that the Victorian government is looking to mirror with the recommendations from the Royal Commission into Family Violence that was conducted last year.
And does this information not travel easily across borders? I mean, in the absence of a visit like yours, how would people here in Australia, or say in the UK or somewhere else in Europe, learn about what's going on in Louisiana?
It's very difficult. We find it challenging to even find out what's happening in different parts of Australia. There's very little information sharing in a coordinated and integrated way around best practice. And I think that one of the learnings from going to New Orleans was that that's actually something that's quite critical, that we need to be able to share information and understand how we can improve our responses at a global level.
Yes, right. So, as you went there, as I say, how did it change your thinking on issues? What sort of learnings did you get out of it? You talked about both practical and theoretical, apart from the whole issue of communication, in terms of how they do things there, how we do things here, what you know about other parts of the world, because I know you've been on a lot of international conferences too.
One thing that absolutely consolidated my thinking was how critical it is for us to do co-located work. So the United States has been leading in this work for a very long time. I've been privileged to visit the US and hear about the family justice centres before at conferences and do very short visits to them, but actually going and working in one for 2 weeks and actually seeing how beneficial it is for the women and the children of families where there's family violence, how beneficial it is to have all of the different support structures in place in the one location. So you've got police, you've got district attorneys, family violence services, children's responses, housing, disability, all on one site. So rather than somebody having to go to multiple places, repeat their story time and time again, either fall through the gaps or have work duplicated, it's really, really, I guess, the most impressive way of ensuring that women and children get the best possible response. And there was many learnings on that actual practical operational work. For example, in America now there's a very strong focus on identifying women who've experienced strangulation. We know that attempted strangulation is one of the biggest precursors to domestic homicide. So all of the police now in New Orleans are trained to identify and recognise the signs that that's occurred. It was wonderful. I got to go to police training and sit with all of the police officers whilst they learnt about identifying those indicators. And it's a learning I've been able to bring back to Australia that I'll hopefully share with the police here.
Could you give us an idea of what your program was like over there?
Very busy.
Yeah. First, how long was it, and how many different places did you go to?
I was in the States and in New Orleans for 3 weeks, but the first week was attending an international conference on technology, which is going to play a very important part in addressing family violence. The next 2 weeks I spent with the Rotary Club and with the Family Justice Centre. So Carl Michelle, who coordinated the New Orleans end of the tour, was wonderful in that he organised for me to not just have an office at the Family Justice Centre and be part of that work and immersed in all of the day-to-day operations. He also organised for me to visit a whole range of other organisations that support family violence: the hospitals, the sexual assault services, children's responses, social enterprise cafes that supported the clients once they'd moved out. The array of services that I got to visit and meet with those that ran them was really such an enormous learning for me. So the other side of it, though, was I also got to meet and speak to a huge number of Rotarians and to speak with them about what I was doing in relation to family violence, but also to hear their thoughts and to gauge some of the insights from an international Rotary perspective of what Rotary can do to address family violence and my passion in particular, how we can support children. I went to the district conference. I was privileged to run a breakout session and to speak. I think that what Rotary can do is unite communities around children. You take away the cultural and spiritual and gender barriers that often exist when we speak of family violence, when we talk about children and giving them a safe future.
So you mentioned there that in addition to the co-location in the Family Justice Centre, there are also all these other services and which are active. How do those relate to each other? What is their sort of coordination and communication process?
So they actually all coordinate through the Justice Centre. Many of those services have a worker co-located in the hub, and those workers then do interviews or initial assessments of the clients that come through. It's a central point, so all of the risk assessments and some of the needs assessments are done at the hub, and then a plan is worked out for safety and for support, and those women and children are referred out to the agencies within the community that can support them. So it's an extremely efficient and supportive way of addressing family violence.
And people who have an issue know they have a one-stop shop they can go to. They don't know, should I go to police, should I go here, should I go there?
Absolutely.
They go there and find
one
out.
place, and anybody that they might need, whether it be legal, policing, support, there is somebody there that can speak to them and guide their understandings of what's available in the community.
And talking about the Rotary side of the experience, you had mentioned to me earlier that you found a great diversity in the Rotary clubs you visited. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So I was very privileged to be able to visit many of the Rotary clubs in Louisiana and Mississippi, ranging from quite large metropolitan clubs to quite small rural clubs with small memberships. But what I found was common across all was the amazing hospitality and the way that I was welcomed and embraced into the clubs. So wherever I went, Rotary made me feel exceptionally welcomed, was incredibly interested in the conversation around how do we support our community to become safer, and a genuine interest and passion in how does Rotary do something about this? How do we as Rotarians contribute? How do we actually unite our communities in not just awareness and fundraising, but in practical setting up of responses? So, for example, I met a wonderful man who was a past president of a club in Louisiana who had set up a men's behaviour change program and was having Rotary support that program. He's now very interested in connecting to the Brighton Rotary Club here, who set up violence-free families and run online men's behaviour change. So the link between what we're doing in Australia, what is happening in America, we're going to be able to bring together those two skill sets and maybe create something even bigger and better.
Good, and a continuing communication.
Absolutely, yes. So connecting clubs and
Mm.
connecting communities, I think, is the key insight that I got.
Yeah. And just as a side issue, whether during your Rotary visits you apparently met the RI President, John Germ.
I did.
You weren't expecting that, I imagine.
I wasn't, and I felt extremely privileged to meet with him. We went to a small club to help with some fundraising. They were doing a community dinner, and so I went with Carl and some of the other members of the Rotary Club that he was leading, and we went to set up a stall to serve food, and unbeknownst to me, John Germ was attending to support the fundraiser as well. And I got the opportunity to not only listen to him speak, which was incredibly inspirational, but also to speak with him about my thoughts around how Rotary could globally lead on eliminating violence against children. And it was really heartening to have his enthusiastic support of that.
Yes. So what would you say to other districts and clubs within districts that might be thinking of arranging some sort of exchange like this? What do you have any thoughts whether it would work anywhere, or are there some parameters that districts should think about before considering making an exchange like this?
No, look, I think that family violence is a global issue. It was announced by the United Nations as an epidemic. It affects every single country in the world. Every government is now tasked with addressing that challenge and reducing the violence. In the Sustainable Development Goals that were put out, it is clearly evident that the United Nations is expecting the world to unite to address this issue. Rotary is, I think, the prime way that this can be facilitated. Just as we did for polio, I think we have the capacity to start the ball rolling around a united global approach. And so with members in every country in the world, we can take learnings from every country. It's
so
not
sharing
of knowledge.
Sharing knowledge is
best practice.
The key first step.
Absolutely, and I think when you're taking practitioners from different countries with different understandings and looking at it through a different lens, you can't but help to get a broader understanding and inspiration for new and innovative ways to work.
And I know that you've been on. Excuse me. I know that you've been on trips as part of a government delegation, as well as here in your Rotary and sort of private or professional capacity. How important do you think it is for government, let's say not the service deliverers such as police or hospitals or social workers, but for government officials, perhaps in health ministries, to be involved in these sort of exchanges? And can Rotary play a role there?
It was interesting. I went as part of a Victorian government delegation to New York a couple of years ago, and whilst on that trip, I was fortunate to have Rotary arrange for me to meet one of the UN representatives of Rotary.
Yeah.
And so the Victorian government official that I travelled with also came to that meeting and learned a lot about what Rotary can offer in the way that it works and the partnerships that it can form with local, state and federal governments. And I think that it's critical that we see this as a community challenge. This isn't a community sector challenge or a government responsibility or a Rotary responsibility. This is a whole of community issue. It affects huge numbers of people and it's generational. It inflicts trauma that goes from early in a child's life right through to their elderly years. We need to understand that this is having an enormous social and economic impact in every single country, and we must unite. And I think Rotary and governments have the capacity to really drive this in a way that's not been done before.
Yeah, so there's an idea for Rotarians in other countries to engage with the governments and see whether we can get them involved in this learning as well, because if Rotary does it on our own, that is, say, sort of sharing of information, then there's still a lot of people who will be left out of the circle who need to be involved, as you're saying.
And I think that Rotary has done this in many other areas, and polio was all the one that I go back to. Polio was a global epidemic as well, and Rotary partnered with the United Nations and the corporate world and governments all over the globe to get to the point where we've almost eliminated that epidemic. If we have the same unity across those different groups to address violence in our communities, we have to be able to make some sort of major shift. Our thinking needs to be around uniting and bringing communities together and connecting them to address this, because it can't be done by just one group.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other ideas that you want to put out there for other Rotarians that we should?
Yeah, look, I think there's two things that I shared my learnings on to the organisations there that they were very excited about, and I assisted them in their understandings and writing tenders for funding, which was the setting up of the school for children who were impacted by family violence and trauma, but also the use of technology.
A separate school?
Yeah, I set up a school here in Victoria, and so I gave the staff in the Justice Centre a comprehensive understanding of what that achieved, and then shared the evaluation reports.
So that will be an approach like having a special school for intellectually challenged children, for children who'd all had a similar experiences.
Well, so it's a transition school, so children who live with family violence are often very traumatised. They fall behind their learning often a couple of years, and often they're the most likely to disengage from school by 16. Most commonly, they're also the children that end up in our youth justice centres and in prisons. So 85 to 90% of those in prison experience child abuse or family violence. The same statistic sits with those that left education by 16. So the correlation, they're the same people.
And the age group we're talking about?
So
the school?
Prep to year 12.
So that...
so we assist those children.
Age of children's ages for people overseas who perhaps
don't understand. So 3 to 18.
So that's a very broad range, of course, really the whole schooling experience.
So we do educational assessments and look at where the child needs support in their learning. We develop learning plans, and then when they transition back into their regular school, the teachers have a comprehensive understanding of the challenges the child has faced, where their learning sits, what support they need. But we also gave the children an iPad that was funded by the Paul Newman Foundation. We gave them the school bag, the uniforms, so the child actually felt like they belonged, and they were not just the child hiding the story or that was important. But the other one that they were very interested in was the technology projects that we did, where we enabled women and children to stay in their own homes, so they didn't become homeless and go into refuge, with the use of personal safety devices and CCTV cameras to deter offenders, because evidence would be collected if they breached orders. And that was an enormously successful project. And now the New Orleans Family Justice Centre is applying for funding to be the first pilot in America to run that project.
And I'll put a link on the bottom of the transcript to how people can find out more about those particular projects, or indeed anything else.